welcome all you guests here and our speakers to today's Fightback session. And while everyone is now, please make yourself comfortable. To be inspired within the next hour, I would like to start off by telling you just a few words about who we are and about the mission we are actually on. So a few words about Founders Lane, which is actually the founders-driven corporate venture builder in health and climate. And Michael, the co-founder, also one of our panelists today, will actually give you a few words about that. But in essence, what we do is we approach today's challenges with an entrepreneurial mind and with results-driven action to co-create a better world by actually co-creating new impact ventures. And Fightback, actually the movement and the community we coined in this context, because in these present times of massive business disruption, we want to contribute by bringing the core leaders together and support them by, for example, hosting these free and trusted sessions of knowledge exchange to equip our business leaders and their companies with actual insights and advice to not only survive, but actually to thrive in the new economy that awaits us. And in today's expert talk, we will explore the fascinating topic of blockchain and platforms with the core question, is decentralization really the key for future mobility? And you are joining today's conversation with two very remarkable humans. So let me please introduce you to Michael. He's a World Economic Forum digital leader, as well as an investor and founding partner of Founders Lane. Welcome, Michael. And our special guest of today, Harry Behrens, the head of the Daimler Mobility Blockchain Factory with a PhD actually from Tokyo University. He is also fluent in 6 languages and obviously, and of course, an expert and evangelist for blockchain in finance and mobility. Welcome, Harry. Great to have you here. Michael, please, the stage is yours, and to everyone, please enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Harry, great to have you with us. I think a few words from my side. We'd love to make this an engaging session today. So Harry and I, we are going to cover a wide range of topics of mobility, blockchain, and platforms, and also talk a little bit about advantages of distributed systems, for example. But we would love for you guys to ask questions. Some questions we can then let flow into the conversation, and any other question we will tackle at the end. But this is your chance to basically ask questions around blockchain and platforms to a renewed expert. So please make use of it. So Harry, maybe to start the session just with a little bit of context, talk to me about what topics around blockchain and platforms are you particularly passionate about? And why do you like to find out more and figure out systems and use cases?
Well, originally, why did I get passionate about the topic in itself? And before I actually managed to bring it into my work life is, well, if you look at what was done with the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto and the actual peer-to-peer electronic currency, it is absolutely new way. Somebody reinvented the way money should flow, money should be transferred, and completely turned the world upside down and solved the key problem that you need to solve in such a state, which basically he eliminated because it came out of a almost crypto-anarchist thinking. So it came out of a rebellious, disruptive mindset, which has appeal. And he, however, married it or coupled it with incredibly stringent, incredibly beautiful technology to think it not only through from an ideology and we should eliminate the middlemen, et cetera, et cetera. No, he actually then, okay, what do you need to eliminate middlemen? What do you need to create a peer-to-peer currency where you have no centralized structure whatsoever? And if you then come to the obvious problem that you need to solve, which is the double spending problem, which is essentially you just try to solve it yourself in your mind, you'll go crazy. It's basically impossible to solve. And he solved it. And then basically what you ended up with was raw software becoming money, becoming business, becoming a world of finance. And that is just unreal. And that got me already extremely fascinated. However, I'm a programmer, I'm a software engineer. So Bitcoin is, yes, they have a little bit of a bytecode kind of scripting, but it's not really programmable. It is what it is. And you can color coins and you can do side chains, but it's not a programmer's tool. But then out comes Vitalik Buterin with his Ethereum, and he adds the fact, okay, now we can add code to this. And that's when things became clear, okay, this is my thing here. This is a way to redefine how business, how software, how finance, how transactions are done. And ever since, I've basically been in that topic.
Great. So Harry, you referenced a lot of the sort of early inventors, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Today we're talking about blockchain, right? So if you and I would try, how would we want to explain blockchain to a 5-year-old, right? So that there's absolutely clear what is it and why do we need it?
Okay, so we have an example that's running around in our company. It's called the Udo or the Klaus example, depending on which. And it's the following: we actually stage it during trainings. So you collect 10 people and you basically make them the spectators. And then you have 2 people at the center. One is Klaus, that was our CEO at the time, and the other one is Udo, that was our CIO at the time. And then Klaus says, hey, Udo, let's go to the pizzeria there, but I don't have any money. Can you lend me some money? And Udo says, yeah, sure, I can lend you some money. How much you need? I need 10 euros. And then Udo gives Klaus 10 euros. And then Klaus buys his pizza, and then the next day they meet with the same audience in the same round, and Klaus comes back to Udo, hey, Udo, here you got your 5 euros. And Udo goes, what 5 euros? You owe me 10 euros. No, I owe you 5 euros. Okay, and then you start saying, all right, now imagine that when Udo gave Klaus the 10 euros, there were 10 people there that each took a record of what just happened, and they somehow made sure that they put their signature on the record and then put this into a central box. And then come the next day, you look into the central box and you see what was stated in the central box, and whatever the majority of these people have committed and written into this central kind of transaction log, that is basically the truth. And the problem that blockchain tries to solve is essentially this: that without a supervisor, there's no bank involved in this, and there's no boss involved in this, that you somehow make sure that money changes hands, you know how much money changes hand, and you can be sure who has the money afterwards, and you do it without a centralized control.
So it's basically a verified transaction where you don't need a supervisor, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And then people talk about in the context of blockchain, people talk about a hash. Yeah.
Yes.
When we say what's the hash here? What's the analogy for the hash?
The best example is actually fingerprint. So I am Harry, and I can give you my fingerprint, and you can always verify that this is my fingerprint. So if you take that fingerprint and you go somewhere and they look at they take your fingerprint again and they compare it to the fingerprint that's in their database, no, that's not you. But when they look at your fingerprint, they do not know how you look. They do not know what your name is. It's just a fingerprint. A hash is very, very similar to that. So in technical terms, it's an asymmetric encryption. So it is a one-way unique mapping of the original to a key, which is one way 100% unique. Your fingerprint will always be your fingerprint, but from the fingerprint, I cannot recreate anything else about you. And the hash is based on algorithms, so software is the same way. So what you do is you take any kind of digital document, you look at it as a field of bits, you run what is essentially a statistical and cryptographical mixture of algorithms, and then you get a very short value of which has the following property. It is totally unique to that document. If you change even one bit in this document, the hash will be different, and the beauty is the hash will be completely different. So it'll not be similar. The document will still be similar. You only changed one pixel, but the hash is going to be whoop. That's how these algorithms are designed. The hash is going to be completely different. So, and there is no way that from this hash, because obviously it's much shorter, so you killed information, there is no way that from this hash I can recreate the document. But it definitely serves, so we sign a contract. And basically we take a hash of this contract, and we give that into a safe box. And then afterwards, in the contract, I owe you 1,000. I think that's not a good idea. It's much better if I owe you 500, right? So I fake my side of the contract, and then I bring it. Okay, we run the hash. It runs over this document. It creates a hash. We take the original hash out of the safe box, and we compare the two. Are they the same? No. I don't know what you changed, but I do know that's not the same contract that we had originally.
So it's basically securing. It's basically securing what is then verified transactions.
Yes.
Great.
And
so
it's not encryption. So yes. So it's basically only a fingerprint. You're not encrypting anything. You're just making sure you got a one-way identifier.
Got it. So obviously, we're not talking about the theoretical concept of blockchain today, although it's important to understand it. We're talking about mobility today. So if you think about what has happened in the last 5 years and what is happening in the next 5 years, what do you think, what are the most exciting trends in mobility where blockchain could play a big role in the future?
Well, there is an overall trend analysis, a strategic analysis, which all automotives, actually including Tesla, have done. Mm-hmm. In our company, it's called CASE. I've seen it called FACES. I've seen it called ACES. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what does it stand for? CASE stands for connected. A stands for autonomous or automated. It depends a little bit on which part you want to emphasize. S stands for shared services. At the Blockchain Factory, we tend to substitute it with software, as in software is eating the world. And E stands for electrification, so electromobility. Add to that the overall trend. So if I'm not sure how many people in the audience are, let's say, below 25 years. So if you would make a survey among the people that are less than 25 years old and ask them, do you own a car? And by that, I would also say personal lease. Do you own a car? Right now, especially people that live in cities, my guess is less than 50% do. In my generation, so when I was less than 25 years old, it was 100% basically. And at the age of 18, we all made our driving license, also no exception. And we tried to buy a car immediately. So, and this trend is softening up. So the fact that it's becoming a sharing economy, in the sense I want to use all, but I'm not really sure I want to own any of it. So these mega trends, they are very much coming to the fore now. And technology making it possible to enable products around this, which basically enable a customer to use any type of mobility form, be it micro-mobility as in scooter, whatever else could be there, be it car sharing, which is essentially a soft form of rental, be it ride hailing, which is taxi, Uber, etc., be it public transport, be it rails. So there's many, many ways of mobility coming. And there is also, it's getting more and more difficult in cities. I mean, you live in London, I believe. So you got, congestion charge. Basically, the cities don't want too much vehicles in the inner part of the city. So there's a major trend in how people move. The beauty is people move more, not less, per person. But it's also clear that this very one-dimensional way of mobility, where I own a car which sleeps 95% of the time, by the way, and because I only use it 5% of the time, I drive to work, I can't go back from work, and maybe I do some shopping, and on the weekend I do short trips, but most of the time the thing is standing still. And these trends together, combined with the convergence of the right technology, and chiefly among the connected cars, so IoT in the big picture, but the fact that each car is now essentially an edge computer, which has highly developed sensors and is an internet connected device with some intelligence inside of the car. Then the fact that cars are getting more and more half automated, at least, capabilities for driving, the fact that you deliver the act or the service of driving as a service by software, and the fact that you're adding the dimension of electromobility, which introduces the whole part of charging infrastructure as well. That is the new world of mobility. So that for me is what we're moving forward towards. Mm-hmm.
So if I hear you talking, a picture is forming in my mind of, we have lots of different devices all around the city that are the supply, and we have lots of different people with different mobility needs. that is the demand. That sounds to me as if we need some kind of matching, preferably with a platform. So if we are, and the name already indicates, blockchain is, I think, one of several DLTs, so distributed ledger technologies. So that sounds a bit like the platform. Where can you see that a blockchain-enabled platform could help with this matching of supply and demand of mobility needs?
Yes, so let's introduce one player which in our strategic analysis is a key player in this. So let's, on the supply side, think about these vehicles. They're held by fleet operators. Because usually, in fact, what you see, even though the most interesting, kind of cases is peer-to-peer, I put my car to rental. In fact, it's probably going to be done by fleets. So you have a lot of decentralized fleets. So you have a lot of fleets that have supply-side vehicles. A vehicle can be a scooter, it can be a car, whatever. And then you got the end user who in one form or the other will move with this. And you have a service provider in the middle. The service provider could be your company in case it's a B2B2E, so business to business to employee kind of setup, where, for instance, I own a car, the company gives me a car and the company gives me a mobility budget. So I'm the user, but I'm not the one who pays. And you as an end user anyway. So the end user is given the supplier. And what you have in this situation, you have a large number of players. You got the scooter provider, maybe 2 or 3. You got the fleet operators, 10, 50, 100. You got the public transports. Don't forget insurance. Don't forget parking. Don't forget fueling. Don't forget charging. So you're dealing with an ecosystem style of market. And if you want to fully automate this, so basically automate so that all transactions, I identify myself, I sign the consent agreement, I consume the service, start of rental, end of rental, confirmed, invoice, revenue distribution, accounting, payment. If you want to automate all of that, you need a couple of key components. And it's not only blockchain, it's a converged set of technologies. So the convergence stack is a beautiful word here. So what you need is, you need digital identities and the capability to provide signatures and proof of credentials. You need blockchain as the distributed ledger to basically book transactions in a way that all participants know they are true and irrevocable, and actually to avoid the classical, garbage in, garbage out problem. You do need actually to make sure that whatever you store in the blockchain is not only immutable, but is actually true. And you can only do that by getting it from the connected devices where the car tells you, that was my mileage, I'm in this GPS. The charging station tells you, I have just delivered X kilowatt, etc. pp. And if you integrate that into one cycle, you got something that normal technology, non-decentralized technology can almost not do, but blockchain can do it almost native.
Harry, we have an interesting question here from the audience where somebody's asking, and I think this is interesting because as you outlined, we have a ton of participants and all of these need to be somehow coordinated and need to somehow adhere to a standard. So the question from the audience from Ming Kao is, do you agree that a platform like this will only work when OEMs like Daimler and BMW are actually cooperating on the same platform, and that constituents like regulation regimes for example, vehicle registration will actually get on the chain so that we actually have a verification potentially through vehicle registration, which is a legal constituent in Europe, for example.
Yes, that's exactly our analysis. So this can never work if one player does it. This can only work because anytime you're looking at building a software platform for a marketplace, obviously a marketplace needs to cover the whole market. So it can only be done if the relevant players are all on it. So definitely it can only be done with a governance where it's a decentralized, call it collaborative, call it whatever way you want. There's a German word which comes very close. It's called Genossenschaft. It's hard to translate. But yes, of course, that is definitely the analysis and that is the strategy forward. So specifically the platform, we are definitely, normally when you talk about platform, the B2C platforms that all of us know are all centralized platforms. So on the demand side, the demand aggregators are usually one big company, and that has a very, very high power to dictate terms. In this case, the approach is not that. It is a platform, so it's a software platform. It should generate network effects, but the governance of it, and that's the key element here, the governance of this platform needs to be decentralized, and the government of this platform needs to be, if you want to call it democratic, but it needs to be somehow like Visa, when it was created, had a similar
like an
approach.
association. Yeah.
Like an association. The Star Alliance is a maybe not bad example. So it needs to be something like that. Otherwise, it will never achieve the necessary market reach, which you need for such an ecosystem.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. So obviously, we are a few years into blockchain. I would say if we are a little bit critical, critics accuse blockchain of, there a ton of money has been spent, a lot of proof of concepts have been done, but we're missing the big throw, shall we say? And maybe the only area where a lot of money has been flown in, also due to speculation, was in crypto asset and cryptocurrency. But using blockchain as a truly distributed system, we haven't really seen the big ones. So if you think about and therefore we're in a chicken and egg problem. So we need good cases so that there's an incentive for everybody to say, we're coming onto this platform, we're being nice to each other, and we're basically collaborating. What early cases can you see that would make it attractive for somebody like Daimler and BMW to say, you know what, let's do it now, because there's a huge cost saving, or we are creating markets we couldn't create before? What do you think? What are cases that excite you, basically?
Well, for me, the case is the moment you have what is our business? Our business at Daimler Mobility and Athlon, which is a daughter company of us, our business is basically financing in all of its form, servicing fleets and end customers. So if you look at this, and if you look at how you could provide an ecosystem where you have a decoupling between whoever provides the customer service is what we call asset light, which means they do not own the car, the scooter, and that obviously has a lot of advantage if you want to scale. So demand aggregation is always a very big number game. You need to get millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users to survive. And if you want to do that, probably part of your strategy will be, don't carry around assets. That's the whole quintessence of the sharing economy. So a hotel company will own the hotel. Airbnb exactly is asset light. That's why they scale like crazy. So if you basically look at this and you look at the fleet markets, which are highly fragmented and they are not yet connected. So that is something that does excite me. But we also have to be realistic. I mean, there's quotes both for the car when it was invented, as well as for the PC when it first came out, and even the history of the internet. The technology is there, and then it takes 1, 2, 3, 5, or 10 years before it achieves the critical mass, and then it goes incredibly rapid. There is what in physics is called a phase transition, which happens at some point, and then it becomes state of the art, and then actually nobody talks about it anymore. We're definitely at the early phases of this. So this is a brand new technology. It has only been considered by the mainstream, if I call companies like us as the mainstream, maybe for 2-3 years. Before that, it was very much a niche story. So you do need to give this some time, because obviously it will go slowly. And it's like, what is a network effect? And it explains also the growth curve. The example of the network effect starts with the telephone. So nowadays, nobody's going to question the value of a telephone. At the time the telephone was introduced, nobody saw a sense in it. So I have the first telephone in my hand. What piece of value is that? 0, right? Then finally, I convince somebody who's important, hopefully, to install the second part. So the two of us are already quite happy. But anybody else, what do I need that for? I don't want to talk to these people. I'm leading my life. And then phone number 3, 4, it's still very boring. And each one of these first phones takes a lot of time and a lot of convincing, because who wants to be first mover? Come on. So it's hard to do, right? But then all of a sudden, there's this tipping point where in your town, 50% of the enterprises, especially the interesting enterprises, use it. And then all of a sudden, everybody rushes in. And this is a natural trend with these new technologies, and it always has to play out. So you need to achieve critical mass. I will not stand here and claim blockchain has achieved critical mass. It has not. But I very much believe that it will achieve critical mass in many, many areas. And when it has, then the phase transition will be rapid. Then whatever was before will become obsolete extremely fast. Just like the coach, when the car entered the world, all of a sudden the coaches were gone in less than 3-4 years. Boom, they were gone from the streets, even though they had survived hundreds of years.
So Harry, if I think about Daimler Mobility and your ability, you are in the areas where you are quite a big player, so you could potentially influence market adoption. Do you think something as revolutionary as a distributed ledger technology, do you think the established OEMs, this is another question from our friends in the chat, like Daimler, could really drive that transformation? Or do we need someone like Tesla with the autonomous driving drive to push for this kind of stuff? What do you think? What's your opinion?
These are scenarios. Both scenarios are possible. There's other scenarios actually that it would be no OEM at all, but that it would be somebody who comes from a completely different software angle, service angle. It's not clear who is actually going to pave the road. There's any number of reasonable scenarios. I cannot tell you which one will basically make it. So hard to say, but what you can look at is who is needed in the ecosystem. So it's hard to say who is going to be the creator of the ecosystem. That's very hard because it depends on your risk appetite. It depends on your strategy. Very hard to say. But if you look at who will be needed, you will need insurance companies, you will need the charging operators, you will need the cities and the smart cities and the traffic control systems, you will need financing, you will need fleet operators, you will need toll collects, and you will need whoever does the whole user experience part of it, which potentially is none of them, but you have pure virtual aggregators, which is actually also a possible scenario. So if just keep your eye on who do you need in that ecosystem, and then just keep an eye on it, and you will notice when they start moving. And then you just
you know, Harry, sure when I look at companies, and I've looked at a lot of companies as investment cases, I'm always slightly scared about too much complexity, because I always think if you have too many stakeholders, at the end, probably only the government can help you. Because if you got so many stakeholders, who is going to negotiate among all those stakeholders? So one idea that I had, and I wanted to ask you, because you've seen so many cases, could there be, if we think about specific use cases, could there be very attractive use cases, for example, in payments, where you start with one single app, you don't have the whole ecosystem built, but this one single app, maybe a charging app, becomes so popular that on the basis of that infrastructure, you can drive an ecosystem through. Have you seen anything that's attractive in terms of, payment or charging?
Well, not directly related to our industry, but look to a very interesting company in Indonesia. Look at Gojek, grab Gojek. They started off as a basically simple ride-hailing company, and they now are a complete ecosystem. So they have become the WeChat of Indonesia. And they did that by identifying one key need, which they served very well, and they immediately branched out horizontally. So the answer is yes, this is possible. And it happened again and again and again. But there is also a word of caution in this. So, and this is a word of caution, which I need to say, I'm working for an industrial company, so essentially supply side, in a, high margin country. We're not a low cost country, we're a high margin company. So any of these platforms where the demand is being aggregated end up in one way or the other being able to set the terms. So a good example is that Uber basically will take anything between 20 and 25% of the revenue, not the profit, of the revenue of their drivers. So if you think about that, and because there's no way the driver can, argue with that, because Uber is very big, they got all of the demand. What's the driver, what's the fleet guy gonna say? He's got no choice, right? So if you look at that, then, and if you look at it from an industrial perspective, and I would in that case say industrial policy or even economic policy level, this is not a desirable outcome. Not if you plan to have an industrial landscape which should stay healthy and needs the companies, maybe not today's companies, but needs companies that can produce quality products with quality salaries and quality social peace. So the platform part is very important, but beware of rent extracting monopolies where essentially all of the value accrues to the one platform centralized operator, and you end up, leaving big holes in the industrial landscape.
So Harry, we have a question from Valentina, who is, that question is goes into exactly what you were just said. So she says, you said risk appetite. Do you think German OEMs or other big traditional OEMs have enough risk appetite to exactly take the risk that there could be rent extracting from margins that they currently have?
I'll have to pass on that question because I don't want to be called in after this call, and so I will pass on that.
You can probably guess the answer.
I will pass on that question.
Very good, very good. So it makes sense. So maybe where do you think, in absence of a huge ecosystem that we could literally create tomorrow, what are things, especially in your practice, so around financial services connected to mobility, what are the things that you're working on, in the sense, the ones that you can share, obviously, that are interesting?
Well, there's one which you can directly Google. It's the mobility blockchain platform, which it's not really a product name, but it definitely explains what it's doing. Mobility blockchain platform. And that's pretty much, we center a lot around that. And there's a financial engine, and that's where basically the whole revenue distribution, making sure everybody gets their money in real time, making sure you have fully automated it with no clawback and no dispute possible, which is called SmartVin, which is kind of lying at the center of this. So both of those have been released to the public, at least as concepts, so I can talk about that. And that pretty much tells you where we're working on. And obviously now, you need to aggregate other components in order to make it really viable. You need to work with the appropriate partners. But at the end of the day, that's the field and that's the area where we put our main focus on here.
So it's basically, it's like a clearing house, and then you need to bring, the more counterparties you bring into this, the more attractive it becomes, because obviously, you need a certain critical mass for decentralization to sort of unfold its power. Otherwise you would just do point to point, basically.
Yes. Blockchain and distributed ledger almost never make sense if you got a fully vertical trusted silo. So a vertical trusted pipeline of either inside of your company or with already very tightly integrated suppliers. There's very few examples that I can think of where something like blockchain makes sense. So it makes sense where you got distributed, fragmented players in the market. That's where it really makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense there also from the whole cost perspective, because if you were to integrate the IT systems, the process systems, the business systems of these, it's very, very hard to do in the doing. So the IT engineers in the audience will know what I'm talking about, especially those that work for regulated or bigger companies. It is not easy to integrate one IT system with another party's IT system in a corporate, regulated, and compliant world. And all of this is taken away by this magic of blockchain and this peer-to-peer established trust. So that's where the focus lies on. The mobility blockchain platform positions itself as such. It is not a service provider, it is an integration platform for service providers so they can bundle their services very easily, seamlessly. They can identify customers once and share this identity across the platform, share the credentials and the verification across the platform, and then in the background, do the revenue distribution based on what was actually sold and consumed by whom, to whom, then in the background in real time, do the distributed ledger magic, where you make sure that everybody gets their money and their bookings and their accounts receivable and their accounts payable in time.
So is it a little bit like I'm renting a car from someone else, I pay for the onboard entertainment inside the car, I pay, or the owner pays the insurance, and I also, because it's an electric car, while I'm driving, I'm at a intermittent charging station. And so I have 4 or 5 different payments going to 4 or 5 main providers, and then hundreds and hundreds of owners of these cars. Is that a use case for platform?
The use case is, so let's not think of payments per se, because actually if you look at companies, what is much more important is the booking. So we count book money, we don't count cash primarily.
Okay.
So think about the booking and the billing relationship. So for the customer, the easiest thing is, in this example, you have one billing relationship and you have one single point of contact. Whoever sold you the bulk, this whole magic can buy anything ticket. And then what you would like is, you don't care. You just present your QR code, your NFC, whatever, you authenticate yourself. There's a verified claim, an access control mechanism. It checks, all right, this person presents herself as, I have been identified by operator A. Operator A has a clarified identity. Operator A verifies that Harry is indeed my customer, doesn't even need to disclose my name, just says this person who will be able to identify herself with that signature or that challenge response has received a ticket from me, and me, operator A, have a smart contract between me, operator A, and operator D, that up to 10 euros, my customer can consume your service. He's not paying, charge me for it, because I am charging her. And this goes for the insurance and for the parking and all of that. So in the background, there's a lot of billing going on, and the customer doesn't really know much of that. The customer just has one billing relationship and end of story. That's so basically the overall.
Yeah, so with that, my risk and my fraud department would be much smaller or non-existent for small payments, basically.
Yes.
We have a question from the audience who says, back to this chicken and egg problem, the cooperative that we were talking about. The question is what we're talking about, so the ecosystem, the blockchain platform, isn't that a role for a neutral foundation normally? If players need to mitigate their conflict of interest?
It definitely needs to be a neutral or shared. It's very hard to tell what the difference is between neutral and shared. So neutral, strictly speaking, a third-party digital player, I don't know from where, coming into, let's say, the mobility market, could be perceived as neutral, but it's not shared, would still lead to the platform in the end being controlled by one party. So neutral is difficult to deal with, but shared, yes, it definitely needs to be a shared, whether it's a foundation or a consortium or whatever legal structure you choose is in the details. But indeed, yes, it needs to be shared and it needs to be collaboratively. It needs to be thought of as a joint infrastructure. An example I like to use is a port. If you think of a city like Singapore, so they have one of the most advanced ports out there. So, and in Singapore, I'm sure the companies in Singapore, they are viciously competing against each other, no doubt. But they gladly jointly finance and keep up and maintain the upkeep of that port because it serves all of them. The port itself is a profitable enterprise in itself, but everybody makes sure this port is nice and kept, well kept. And it could even be that we are complete competitors, but we still share a warehouse in that port because I'm simply too small to have my own warehouse. It doesn't work. So let's just share, even though you're my competitor. So this blockchain part is at the port or at the warehouse level. And then what you do on it, that is where we compete. So it's a multiple layer between competition, collaboration, and cooperation. And the blockchain decentralized platform is definitely on the lower side of these and not on the competition side of things.
Yeah, and so far, we have one follow-up question. So far, the existing blockchain alliances and other alliances, here the example was MOBI, they haven't really achieved this because it needs to be more specific, I assume.
There's two levels. There's always two levels in this. You can have the development consortia.
Yeah.
So Hyperledger is one example they actually do. Then you have Mobi, that's another one dedicated, but these are development consortia in essence. But then you got the part where it gets relevant in terms of business is not the development. In terms of developing it, that's where the coding happens, if you wish. But when you then start paying tax and earning money, you're at the level of running a real tax-paying, registered, legal entity. And that has relatively few of them exist. There are the best examples of running ones are in the trade finance sector. So trade finance is basically the financing side of supply chain. Supply chain is very popular in blockchain area, but it's very, very difficult to do actually if you look in the details. But if you abstract from the physical components, which make it so difficult, of supply chain, and you only look at the money flow, which is what trade finance does, it's very convenient and very near, and how do you say it, springs to mind to operate that. And there is real functioning, running, money-making consortia in the trade finance sector. So I would say that is the one industry which is ahead of all others when it comes to real life productive adoption of blockchain.
Yeah, we have one more question which refers a little bit to what we've said with EV before from Dan Barton. How could you use blockchain if you think about the ecosystem where the electricity providers play a big role?
Well, there's already examples for that out, actually. In Germany, there is a company, well, it's not a company, it's a venture foundation. It's called Share and Charge. And that's basically just like the name does. Because if you look at it again from the mobility perspective, so think about the B2B to E scenario, where there's a company that provides the vehicles as fleets with everything around, so full service, full package. So the company that is getting these cars needs to worry about nothing. So when the car is being fueled, it's taken care of, it's all part of the package, right? So now if you look at the charging world, there's the number of charging stations is vastly, I think a factor of 100, between 100 and 1,000 will have to be bigger than gas stations. So you will have incredible amounts of charging stations out there, and it's going to be highly fragmented. So, but obviously, both from the supply side, from the charging operator's perspective, but also from the demand side, so from those who are charging, we want to be able to do this seamlessly. We don't want to have, I don't know, 1,000 times 1,000 contracts. That's really not a nice way of doing things. No. So in this very decentralized area, that is a decentralized par excellence. So in there is the obvious scenarios which combines actually machine-to-machine transactions, because you can actually use what is called in the industry the hardware wallets, which are essentially the smart devices with an embedded blockchain client, roughly. That's basically what that means. And that actually do the real transactioning, the countersigning, the verification, in the far future, possibly even the payment. But before that, just give the relevant signatures to the motherships. I just delivered 10 kilowatt of electricity. The car confirms I received more or less 10 kilowatt of electricity. This is all signed cryptographically, sent to the distributed ledger nodes of the two motherships, and then you basically settle the account in real time, and the car goes on, and the customer is not even involved, and the whole thing gets settled and paid in the background.
Sounds to me that in the future we could see a bit more cross-functional alliances, because through the EV we have two industry togethers who didn't talk much apart from being a customer, one being a customer and the other one being a large supplier. So we have one more follow-up question, and I think he refers to what if you broaden the use case and you also not just consume electricity, but you sell electricity to the grid, basically, which is obviously the holy grail of the whole closed system of EV charging. And
there's very real initiatives that is actually happening. So people are doing that, and we know some of the people that do this. And it is the holy grail, as you say it. especially if you're in a country like Germany where you have a lot of renewable energy.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's not very easy to keep your network balanced on the 50 hertz level, because you basically, wind blows when the wind blows, sunshine when the sun shines. You want to harvest it, but you haven't aligned it with your demand at that point in time. So that is indeed the Holy Grail. And because it's the Holy Grail and life is never easy, this will take a lot of time, because also you need to understand that the energy market is part of the core infrastructure of every nation. So it is regulated in a very, very, very complicated way. So this will come, I am confident of this. And if you are interested in it, Google something called V2G, vehicle to grid, or V2X, which is an overset of it. But people are working on this, people are researching this, and it will ultimately come. But again, this will also be critical mass and regulation. And this is, by the way, whenever you deal with blockchain projects, the software technology is not the critical path. It's also not the roadblock. You have the one dimension, achieving critical mass, which makes or breaks your business case. And on the other side, you got the whole regulatory framework. What am I even allowed to do? And is there enough clarity on what I'm allowed to do and not? So those two factors are always a big factor in establishing such ecosystems. And the example you mentioned about the grid is a perfect example where both will come to the play.
Yeah, we have one more question that referred to something that we discussed earlier, which was, we talked a lot about verification, and we haven't really talked a lot about autonomous vehicles, for example. And the question here is, when you have a machine-to-machine economy, so autonomous vehicle would be one example in mobility, do we have solved the problem of machine identity? Because then it becomes a question of life and death. If I don't know the identity of each machine, and I can't identify it in a large peer-to-peer ecosystem. Is that something that are we solving this right now, and could it be solved through blockchain?
This has already been solved. Again, Google Mobility Blockchain Platform, Google some of the partners we have. So I just mentioned the word hardware wallet. And the wallet here, the focus is not so much on the money. So at least the male participants here in the call, normally if you grab your right-hand pocket in your trousers and you open the wallet, you will find your ID document in it, most of the time. So that's what a wallet actually does. And a hardware wallet does exactly that. It provides a secure element in your device. It makes it physically secure, that's one element. And then it provides, based on the secure element cryptographic component, it provides a digital identity. So essentially you can break it down to private key, public key. But nowadays you add on one more layer of abstraction, which is called decentralized identity. So for the techies out there, it's the so-called DID standard by the W3C. And this problem has already been solved. It hasn't become mainstream yet, but technically speaking, you can consider it solved.
Great. So I think that answers this question. What is your personal opinion around autonomous driving? I know you're not a car builder, but obviously, when technical standards are already solved, we would love to see the acceleration of the main use cases as well, to put it to good use. What's your personal feeling? Is this going to play a role, or are we many years away?
Very hard to judge. This is very hard to judge. Very hard for me to give a qualified opinion. I simply don't know.
Okay, I hear you. It would be nice, but so far I think we are hearing the typical positive and negative news flow out of the different tests. And you have to ask yourself, if you always need a driver in the car, especially when it's a serviced car like Uber, then what's really the saving, basically? So I think that's also an economical challenge that you need to solve here. Great. So I think we're almost at the end of our session. I just wanted to quickly check because obviously we've tried to integrate as many questions as possible, but are there any other questions from our audience? If so, please enter them into the chat now, because we have about 5 minutes left. Basically, I just wanted to make sure whether we can do that. And then I think, Tim, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and then it's time to take over from you, just to make sure that we do the follow-up and the upcoming sessions. Yeah. Okay, so there is okay. There's one more question. Is Daimler still investing into distributed ledger technology? Well, I'm assuming you are, because you are working on blockchain initiatives, aren't you?
Well, I represent the Daimler Mobility Blockchain Factory, so that should tell you something.
Oh, now I get a bit more context. Even with the COVID-19 crisis, basically. So, is this something that you are committed to? That you feel you will continue to invest into in a long time, because it is basically a future-proof initiative?
The COVID situation is a very fundamental situation, and it is especially fundamental also for the automotive industry. So, and I don't think anybody at this point can fully be confident on having realized all of the implications of what this means and how far it will reach. So I can probably give you a qualified answer in 3 or 4 months. Right now, things are still very much in flux. So it would be, how do you say, vermessen in German? It would be vermessen to try to give an answer to this, because the situation is
ludicrous.
Yes, because it's unfolding in front of our eyes. So we first need to understand what is happening, what happened, and how to deal with it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Harry. I think I had a lot of fun. That was a great discussion. And also thank you to the audience of providing us with interesting questions. And I hope that we could answer some of those questions sufficiently within the time that we had. And I think with that, I would like to hand it over to Tim, who has a few words to say.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to the audience for the questions.
Harry, I would actually like to add one more. For me, it's interesting to see, like, from a geek perspective, like, is there something like that you would say, like, is really like the one thing that you would wish would happen in the next, I mean, I don't know, like next years, yeah, just to say, not like take away like all the regulatory issues and everything, just like from a geek perspective.
Well, I'll give you 2 answers. One is from a geek perspective. If you look at the whole topic of the token economy, which got a really bad rep in the 2017's world, but the token economy, tokenization, that is a fundamentally important and highly interesting topic. And I believe there is incredible, in German you would say, there's incredible music in there. And then from a tech level on actually in the blockchain scene, but also the digital identity thing, how do you make interoperability either on the identity level or on the consensus level possible? I'm a strong believer on interledger interoperability based on consensus. So approaches like the Tendermint approach, known maybe under the name of Cosmos as part of the organization that's behind it. Or on the other side, people are approaching it through the DID related world. So the whole Hyperledger Indian Arias approaches, but because you will have several lakes of blockchain. So you'll have, there will not be the one blockchain to bind them all. So people should already now think about how do we make sure that interoperability can be achieved, especially you have a very high criterion on this because blockchain is still super secure, super immutable, completely cannot be changed. So the standard is extremely, extremely hard. And to carry that standard and this safety and this security across blockchain platforms is really, really, really hard to do. It's fundamentally complicated. How do you achieve consensus across platforms and keep the same level of security that, in the strongest case, a proof of work does in each one of them? And that's a fundamental issue which needs to be solved to make this truly mainstream. we're years before this becoming relevant in the business sense. But this is technically speaking, if I were to get into the PhD side of things and write another PhD, I would probably seek to look for my PhD either in the tokenization, token economy world, if I'm on the economy side, or if I have an MBA. But if I'm a software engineer, I would look at interledger consensus or interledger protocols. That is where I would put probably my focus as a geek.
Super nice. Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Really interesting session we just had. Fantastic. Thanks to the audience for all the questions. We have more of these sessions, the Fightback sessions, lined up, and there are already some that we had in the past. And I just posted the link in the chat, and you can see it again here, sharing my screen again. You can actually see there's more to come when you go on sessions.founderslane.com. We have more experts invited also over the next weeks and months, and you find all the reviews from the sessions before. We'd like to invite you to go there to find out more. And with this, I would like to thank you all again. Wish you a wonderful summer ahead. Again, stay healthy, stay safe, and yeah, wish you all a great day.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.